That's a very simple question with a complicated answer. Are
Yeah.
you the hardest working person in your classroom, on the field, on the court? And if you are, keep going because someone's trying to catch you. If you're not, we need to have a chat and find out.
Urban Meyer, welcome to the Comfort, Peace, and Freedom podcast. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Great to be with you.
So I just want to get through, I know you're busy today, so I want to get through a couple of things. I want to talk about a little bit about where you're from. I'm just going to read this off because there's a lot of similarities in our backgrounds here. You were born in Toledo, Ohio in 1964, but yet you moved to Northeast Ohio in Ashtabula. Ironically, I lived in Northeast Ohio growing up, and I used to work for a landscaper, and we would get all of our supplies from all the nurseries on the South Shore of Lake Erie in Ashtabula. So I'm sure you remember that. You graduated from high school in 1982 from St. John's. Is that right?
Yeah.
I graduated the same year from a school called Nordonia, and I'm pretty sure we used to wrestle you guys back in the day, but I'm not sure. I'll have to check on that. So getting into your background real quick before we get into the questions. So you were drafted by the Atlanta Braves, played a couple years with them before moving on to University of Cincinnati, where you played defensive back, and then came coaching, assistant at Ohio State, then Illinois for a couple years, Colorado for 5, Notre Dame for a handful, and then your head coaching career began. You started at Bowling Green, just south of where I'm standing right now, and then Utah. Amazing career at Florida, and then what I think is the pinnacle living in Ohio, the Ohio State career. 219 games, you won 182 of them. Amazing 85% win record. Can you talk a little bit about where your interest in coaching came from?
Sure. It started at a very young age. I had a dream like a lot of young people. You wanted to be a professional athlete, and that sports were everything. With me, my father was a chemical engineer, and my sisters were, really excellent students. I was a good student too, but there was a means to an end for me that sports were everything. But I came from a family that really pushed academics. So between academics and sports, that occupied every second of our lives. And I'm very fortunate to have parents like that. So I just knew I wanted to play as long as I could, and I became really intrigued. I was one of those kids that had like all the football and the big red machine, all the baseball cards, and football cards all over my room. But I also, at a young age, got very interested in Tom Osborne, Joe Paterno, Woody Hayes, Bo Schembechler, Bobby Bowden. That was my generation of. And I would read. I was really intrigued by Tom Osborne. He was the first coach that utilized strength training to make it part of his. That was their edge at Nebraska back then. So I just, at a very young age, I knew, and there really wasn't much hesitation. Once I did start coaching, I did send away. My second choice was law school, and I was really struggling early in my career, and like a lot of people, and I was at Illinois State University. I think we went 1-10 my first year there, and I was making like $6,000 or $7,000 a year, sleeping in the office. And
Wow.
And I sent away for the LSAT, and my wife, Shelly, said, God has a plan for you. So let's stick this thing out. And about 2 months later, I got a phone call from Earl Bruce, who just got hired at Colorado State, and that's when it kind of took off.
So when you went through, I mean, it sounds like the few losses that you ever had were early on in your career. So eventually you arrived at Ohio State, and by this time you had amassed an amazing record. What had you learned about coaching by then that you brought to Ohio State on that first day?
Yeah, I think in any profession, I'm in the television world now, and I'm on a couple corporate boards, so I'm learning the corporate side of the world. And so I think any profession, or even being a parent, you're just continuing to learn. And once you stop learning, you stop living. So I learned a lot. I learned a lot at Florida. I was exposed to things I was never exposed before too. I had some health issues. That's why I stepped away. There was zero balance in my life at one point. and so I really worked hard to make myself better. And that was, not be so consumed. And, it worked a little bit, but it really didn't work a little bit because I was one of those guys that when I was at Florida, we never took a vacation. We just never left. And if I did leave for a day or two, I was recruiting the whole time. So I tried to, my personality is such that if I'm going to do something, it's hard as I can possibly go. And so I tried to back off a little bit at Ohio State, for my tenure at Florida. And I did a little bit. And I also wanted to make sure our players enjoyed it. Like we won a national championship with Florida, and I'm not sure I enjoyed it or the other players enjoyed it because it was all about the next one. In 2014, we won it again at Ohio State. And I just, I really wanted to, I tried. I'm not saying it worked perfectly, but I wanted everybody to enjoy the moment a little bit.
So when you talk about leading, and you wrote a great book, which we're going to talk about in a minute. When you arrived at Ohio State, was there anything lacking in the mindset of the players at that time? I know that I'm sure your first day, your first locker room meeting was interesting, but did you have a written out plan of what you were going to do that first meeting, or you just walk in there and kind of shock and awe the thing, or how did that work for you? Knowing, I mean, you're taking over such an amazing program and you want to change it. How'd that work for you?
Well, I've spoke on this many times. Is that you can't have a cookie cutter way of taking over something because everything's different. And Lou Holtz used to always remind me anytime we had a conversation about a team, he would always ask me, what are we dealing with? A team is a living organism, it's alive, and every situation is different. So when I took over Bowling Green, it was a team that was, I think 8 straight losing seasons. They were 1-10, 2-9, and those kind of places you take a power washer to a blowtorch to it. You just you implode the whole thing because you have to. And then I went to Utah. And Utah was like a 5-7. There's some there's some positives there. Obviously, they're very good players. And so you kind of take a garden hose to that one, and you got to. And then I went down to Florida, and there's a lot of positives. You just kind of clean it up a little bit. There was some stuff that had to be changed. And Ohio State was Jim Trussell, a good friend of mine, had a great program there. We did a lot different. Our styles were much different, but obviously he's a winner, and he had a great culture there. And they had a really bad year. They were 6-7, but when Coach Trussell left, so you just had to kind of. There's certain areas I wanted to change. The strength and sports performance model was the exact opposite of what I wanted. So we devoted a lot of time and resources to that. So no, there's not a cookie. My point is saying there's not, hey, we're going to do it this way. It depends on what you have. And I think you always err on the side of first of all, keeping people and keeping some consistency, unless it's like I said, a blowtorch thing where you just got to wipe it all out.
So you've gone from, in the headlines today, you got the Deion Sanders blowtorch. He obviously went in there, just took like you said, a garden hose to the whole thing. But at Ohio State, you're saying it was a little more surgical. So was there some immediate fixes you could do, and then some kind of more long-term ones that you can talk about?
Yeah, you always break it down into, recruiting's the lifeblood. So we changed the whole recruiting model at Ohio State. We went a little more national. We took the Big Ten was not very good back in 2012. Matter of fact, it was bad. The recruiting was kind of limited to the footprint of the Big Ten, which, it's just reality that the population shift had happened, and a lot of the talent. You just look at the NFL draft. They're all over the place. It's not. Right. There was a time where you could sign most of the kids from Ohio. Unfortunately, can't do that anymore. So we went on a more national. That was my SEC background. We jumped all over Florida, Texas, in some areas, and went. We went for the best players in the country, not just best players in the footprint. So that was number one. The number two thing was our sports performance model and nutrition and health and safety of the players. It was much different than what I had been used to, and so we blew that up. And then you have the academics. You have the recruiting. Well, we already talked recruiting, sports performance. Then you have other areas that facilities where, I'm not a big facility guy, but we had to do some things there. So the two most important, recruiting and sports performance, we did a lot to that. Then there was other stuff that was in great shape, and we didn't change that much.
How did you know? Like, what was your first moment? I know that you work a lot with vision. You said even as a young person, you saw coaching as something you might want to do, and I talk a heck of a lot about that, even in all the work that I do. What was your first inkling at Ohio State that you're like, you know what, this is working? What I'm doing is I'm changing things. I mean, besides winning, when did you notice like, okay, I got these guys, I got them?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's something that I had some really trusted soldiers around me. My strength coach, Coach Marotti, was, I mean, every step of the way. He was the number two in charge. We were the first staff. I was the first coach to really make it that way. That the strength coach, and he's not a strength coach. He's a sports performance person, and he had such a gauge on the players. And it was really difficult because there was a great love for the previous coach, Jim Tressel. And I get it. I love Jim Tressel.
Sure.
We were a much different approach. We were mat drills and combative training, and I mean, it was uncomfortable. And I believe in discomfort. Discomfort but makes people grow. And until about September at the Michigan State game, we did not have. We were awful the first few games in 2012, and they just lost 7 games, first time since the 1800s. They had a
Wow.
losing season. Or lost 7 games, and so think about it, first time since the
Right.
1800s.
Wow.
And so we had to really, and there was some resistance, which I'd expect and I'd invite, but now it's starting to cut into our opportunity to win. And I mean, we were losing to Miami, Ohio after the first quarter, my first game. We were playing awful,
Yeah.
and finally, you have to get leaders to buy in, and a guy named Zach Boren, you know, jumped in, and once he jumped in, that team became a really good team. Matter of fact, we could have, if we didn't have that probation issue, we could have played. We were undefeated. We could have played for a national title.
So along you're starting to have this success, and right in the middle of your career at Ohio State, you decide to write a book, and it becomes a New York Times best-selling book. And I know a little bit about that because I wrote a book myself. Didn't quite get to the New York Times list. I got to the Wall Street Journal, but not to the pinnacle like you did. That book is still, even though it's almost 9 years old, it's still in the top 100 coaching books on Amazon, of which there are 18 million books for sale there. Did you wake up one day and go, you know what? I think I'm going to write a book today. I'm going to be a writer. Or did that just kind of happen?
We wrote when I was at Florida. Buddy Martin, one of my great friends, a writer. We wrote one. It was more of a regional tour for the Florida Gator fans.
Okay.
And then Tim Kite, my leadership consultant, who was very close to me and was very instrumental in our run at Ohio State. There was just so much good that came out of that season. You have a third string quarterback. You have a tragedy where a player took his own life.
Yeah.
You had so much adversity, and teams are built on adversity. Life is built on adversity, and there are so many moments that I wanted to share with not just Buckeye Nation, but maybe my kids someday. And as we started getting our minds together, said this could be a really good book. And books, I like reading, and I don't read enough, but when I do, when I get something that really, I told the publisher and the ghostwriter, and then also Tim Kite, who was involved, I want this to be that, that book, because I have a couple of them that I used to read every year right before the season, just to get my mind right about
Sure.
there's a Bill Walsh book out there, and so I'm very proud of it. I've heard so many great compliments, and I'm glad it's out there still.
Well, it's for everyone out there listening. The book's called Above the Line. It's about leadership. I've read it, and there's just some gems in there when it comes to even if you're directing people, no matter if it's on a sports team or it's a Fortune 500 company. He even talks about family, and I'd love to talk about that a little bit, because throughout the book you credit your dad for being such an amazing force in your life. Do you use some of the same guidance he gave you with your own kids?
Oh, everything. Yeah, sure. I remember, my father sat me down when I was 6 years old, and we talked about core values, and who does that? And I used that with
You're
my
right.
team,
You're
family,
right.
and it was tough. Now, I mean, we grew up in a demanding household, which once again I'm extremely grateful for. He never missed a game. He never missed. We If I needed new clothes, we didn't have much money. But we didn't get the things that we didn't need. But if it came to academics or athletics, I got the best baseball glove you could buy. I had the best cleats that you can get. But if I needed, I think I had one pair of jeans or something. It just, and I kind of, we weren't that, I wasn't that harsh with my kids, but we were, if it was about excelling who you were, making you better, we spared no expense. It was about frivolous nonsense. And, like Shelley, we had no video games in the house. You're not allowed to play video. You're busy. We don't have time for that.
Well, it's funny. It's funny you say that. It's so funny you say it because my father was a U.S. Marine, and he had 5 boys, all under the age of 9, in a 1,500 square foot house in Twinsburg, Ohio. He kind of ran our house like the boot camp at Paris Island. And when you talk about jeans, I remember the jeans used to get at Sears that were so stiff you had to take like 6 months just to kind of break them in, and they lasted forever. So I get exactly what you're saying. When you talk about in the book leadership, is this advice you think that, should families read this book and learn from it how they can run a family, the unit that has harmony and leadership and respect and all that?
Well, I'm very biased. I think it touches all bases. I think it touches the family. It touches faith. It touches, you can see in that book that family has been, and that's the other thing. I was raised in a family that I think the stories in there about when I was really, I think in 2nd or 3rd grade, and someone was picking on my sister, and my dad said, "Okay, tomorrow." So, and my sister was crying, and he said, "Okay, tomorrow, between classes, you hit this kid right in the face as hard as you possibly can." And one thing everybody in this household understands: you don't ever mess with the Meyer.
Right, I remember that.
Especially your sisters. And I raised my kids the same way. And I tried to raise my team the same way. Don't ever, the whole disrespecting women type thing. That doesn't fly. So, I'm a 3rd grader. I never hit anybody in my life before. And I remember when the bell rang and I was nervous, I was sweating, and I put my books down. Here he came, the guy that was picking on my sister, and bigger than me, I think 2 years older than me. And I hit him in the face as hard as I possibly could. Now it wasn't, I was 5 years old or whatever it was, 7 years old. So, and I went to the principal's office, and sure enough, my dad came walking in, and it was a very controversial situation with the principal. He made it perfectly clear that we don't put up with bullying. And so as a lesson learned, and that night I get home, once again, we didn't have much money. He said, "Okay, everybody get dressed up. We're going to dinner." That was a big deal back then.
Yes, it was.
And we went to dinner, and as we're sitting down at the table, he said, "No, you sit at the head of the table. You're a man now. You just protected, wow. You just protected your family." And do I think that's a life lesson for every family? And that's absolutely. I'm not sure they teach that in school anymore, but they're teaching other things. But I think that's, if someone's messing with your family, you don't do that. Certainly if it's your sister. And so, I think there's incredible lessons in there. That's one of the greatest lessons I've ever learned in my life.
They talk about the breakdown of the family. Okay. And I had 2 great parents. They're still alive today, and they're still an influence in our lives today. So one of the things when you see, I have 200 employees here, and I started with 6 in 1986. And I can tell you, I've had to be an involuntary life coach. Okay. I have no formal training, no college degree. And I had to kind of figure out how to direct all these people to do some pretty hard construction type work. And I could almost tell to the person the difference between a guy who had a father and a guy who didn't have a father in his life. Did you find a little bit of that when you were coaching?
Oh my gosh. That's, and when you say a father, I kind of, I just throughout my career, I would have different issues I deal with. And some would be nonstop. And then I kind of, at one point, because I started changing our recruiting model, that there was a certain person that I wanted in our team. And I just don't have time to fix all the, all these fall on the head coach, whatever the issues are.
Sure.
And I found that if a player had a family, a mother and a father, Now they didn't have to be necessarily together. Like I use the Bosa family a lot because I coached Joey Bosa and Nick Bosa, two of the greatest kids I've ever been around.
Sure.
But they're a result of two of the greatest parents I've ever been around. The mom and dad were no longer together. They were cordial, and they were divorced, or that's their business. But that mom and dad were so there for me and our coaching staff that there's always issues. There's always something.
Right.
If you have that mom and dad that have their hands on this thing, there's a high correlation that this person's going to be great. And I would always circle two areas. If there is faith in that person's life, and if there was a mom and dad, it was about a 95% chance that person's going to graduate, have a heck of a career, and would not be an issue for us. If you take faith out and you take one of the parents out, that person, there's a correlation that guy is going to struggle at times, because we all struggle. But if there's not that group, it takes a village to raise someone. I agree with that. And I've not only agree with that, I know it because I did it for 38 years. So you add the two, faith and family, together, the chance that that person is going to have a great life, a great career. Now, of course, there's exceptions, but I'm putting that about a 95% hit rate.
Yeah, what's great about that is you make such a good point, because there can be divorces, right? But as long as the two parents stay involved in their kids' lives, I think that's what's really important. There's so many things my father taught me. There's so many things that he still, I still hear him say today that it's just so important. And for him not to be in my life at all, there'd be just this huge hole missing. And that brings me a little bit to the next question. I just have a couple more. And this one is, when you hear about 7.2 million American men sitting out of the workforce, okay, they're purposely sitting out of the workforce. And they say that these guys average 6 hours in front of a screen per day. And yet this economy needs so many people to do so many great things, whether it's blue collar, white collar, whatever. So if you had to put your coaching hat and you had 7.2 million of these kids in your locker room right now, these men, what would you say to them?
It wouldn't be pleasant. It'd be, I think, you go back to your faith and your purpose. And what is your purpose? It goes back to our conversation about 4 or 5 minutes ago was, the minute you have a child, you're dad. And we do understand there's marriages that break up. That's part of life. But that doesn't change your title. Your title is dad. And a dad doesn't make someone pregnant. A dad raises that child.
Right.
And once again, I'm not being discrediting the divorces and all that. I mean, that's everyone's business. But I am discrediting the fact that if you're the father of that kid or the mother of that kid, that's your greatest of all the obligations that you have in your lifetime. Nothing's even close to that. And so once again, and I was 38 years in a laboratory watching and trying to fix issue, to be part of solving things. And I'm like, I couldn't believe. And it was mostly related to that. Same thing if you have an obligation, that also, that dad word or mom word, that includes going to work and supporting those children. I mean, that's job description. When God creates you, of all your responsibilities, that's 1A and 1B.
Yeah, it is job one. And thank you for that. Quickly, we saw each other first at the Folds of Honor at Inverness in Toledo, Ohio. If you remember, I was supposed to jump out of an airplane for Folds of Honor that morning, but the weather it was on, then it was off, and it was on, then it was off. And then we went out on the golf course. We got rained out, if you remember. And but still, you gave a great speech there. And I still continue to support Folds of Honor. What makes you want to support these military folks the way you do? Because you do such a great job of it.
Yeah, that's our passion, Shelley and I. My father was Army, my sister was Air Force. I use the United States military, the men and women who serve our incredible country, and as leadership examples. They do the ultimate example of inspiration is the men and women who serve our country. I can't think of a greater way to model leadership and model culture. That's the respect I got to flying an F-16. My Folds of Honor crew that got me up in a plane, which I'm claustrophobic and scared of heights, but I did it. And then I went and hung out. One of the greatest moments, I took about 16 F-16 pilots to what's that place called? Loma Linda's.
Loma Linda's, yeah, sure.
And we had I just love them. I can't say thank you enough. And I consider first responders in that same, group of people. Are you kidding me? First responders and the men and women who serve our country, police officers, and it's the most unselfish group of people I've ever been around, and I'm forever grateful.
Yeah, with the toughest job ever. I know Skip that took you on that flight, and they've I've been very fortunate because I support them a lot. The 112 Stingers out there, and they actually made me their honorary commander a few months back. So I'm going to go see them this Thursday, as a matter of fact. But there is a slight possibility that might happen to me someday. So what advice do you have for me when you're in the back of that F-16?
If you're a claustrophobic, man, just that's my biggest issue is. But Skip actually played for me at Bowling Green. He was a backup kicker for me, so he took it easy on me. We got up to about 3.5, 3.8 Gs.
Right.
Just make sure you have a little chat with them before you go, because they can break you in half if they want to. We did an invert. We broke the speed of sound. We came to formation. But he said to me, he says, "You want to do a couple rolls and all that?" And I said, "No, I'm good, man. Let's go back." But it was, once again, it was a bucket list. I'm 60 years old now, so I'm starting to some bucket list things. That was one of them. Exactly. But I love those guys, man. I love those. I'm going to go to the. Maybe you'll join me next year. I'm going to go to the naming. They give the pilots names, and I can't wait to do it. I'm gonna go next year with them.
Actually, if you want to know the truth, I'm supposed to get my name at the naming next year, so I can't wait to see what they come up with.
We'll be together then.
Beautiful. Finally, just two quick things. My nephew Cooper is a redshirt foreman for the University of Toledo. He started playing this year on first, and he caught his first 2 touchdown passes in his first couple games, and he's got about 100 yards receiving. I know for a fact he's going to be listening to this. What advice would you give young Cooper Rusk as number 23 as a wide receiver for the University of Toledo Rockets?
Same thing my father gave me as a young person. He said, "I don't care how fast you are. I don't care how tall you are, how strong you are. I don't care how smart you are. All I care is this: are you the hardest working guy on the team? And if you are, keep pushing, because someone's trying to catch you. If not, I need to know why." And that's as he would say, and I'd said to many people, that's a very simple question with a complicated answer. Yeah. Are you the hardest working person in your classroom, on the field, on the court? And if you are, keep going, because someone's trying to catch you. If you're not, we need to have a chat and find out why.
Beautiful. Last question, and thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. I know you're busy. In my book, I talk about the pursuit of comfort, peace, and freedom is our own personal nirvana, meaning, not everyone's going to chase 15 cars, McMansions, and yachts and rap star careers in their life, but we should all have something that we're chasing, that we're aspiring to. And I believe that is our own personal version of comfort, peace, and freedom, whatever that might be. So when the cameras are off and nobody's around and you want to just chill and get away from it all, where are we going to find Urban Meyer when he's looking for his own personal comfort, peace, and freedom?
It's all Shelly and the kids. Now we have 4 grandkids, and I've really come to appreciate the handful of friends that you really have in life. That it's not about beating the team up north, or it's not about beating Georgia. That's all fun, and that circle of people kind of disappears when you aren't beating Georgia anymore. So I'm on the water somewhere with my family and grandkids. I am a water nut. I have a boat down in Florida, and I mean, I could live, if Shelly would let me, I'd live on the water the rest of my life. So I'm a big blue water and white sand guy.
Beautiful. I've got myself a Boston Whaler in Naples, Florida myself, and I can't get enough of it. I've had it all over the place, Bahamas, Northern Michigan, everywhere. And I'll have to run into you down there sometime. Urban Meyer, thank you so much. It was, again, I know how busy you are. I know that you have very little time in your schedule, and to take some time and talk to us about leadership, especially when we need it so badly right now for some of these young folks out there. I just want you
I
to
really
know.
enjoyed this. Let's do it again. I didn't know what this was going to be, but I'll make time. I really think this can help. Thank you.
Well, for sure. And I will, I've got some other projects coming out, and I'll make sure to talk to you about them, and we'll hook up again. I really appreciate it. Thank you again.
Thank you.